Hey, what's up, everybody? Bro Trio here. Well, actually, it's just me. It's just Daniel today because I am here to talk about Final Fantasy III, the next installment of me playing through all the Final Fantasy games. I did go on a bit of a bender. I think I said this for Final Fantasy II, but I played through like a bunch of Final Fantasy games earlier this year. And then I just got too addicted to the gameplay. I couldn't stop playing them, so I forgot to actually, film my reviews of each of them. So, I'm going back and doing these, so we might be getting a few videos here quickly. The end of the year games were pretty rapid as well, plus we got all the end of the year planning going on, so that's been, slowing down my progress. But today, we're talking about Final Fantasy III. I've already talked about 1, 2, and 16. So, Final Fantasy III, how does it stack up to the rest? Basically, let's compare it to the original 1 and 2, because these were all the three on the NES. So, it is, like, they are taking incremental steps to what we now recognize as Final Fantasy as a franchise. Like, with your Final Fantasy 6's, 7s, 8s, 9s, like that's basically what people think of when you say Final Fantasy. They think of those games, how those games play and stuff like that. And you can really start seeing like the different pieces of the puzzle all come together with each subsequent entry. So in 1 and 2, they kind of like, 1 established the franchise. It's the first game, so that is groundbreaking in its own right. Final Fantasy II kind of got the, like, out of nowhere, like, plot stuff going on. And then Final Fantasy III introduces a lot of other staples to it. So, we'll try to keep this relatively spoiler-free. We'll start with the negatives, because I'm keeping it spoiler-free because, yet again, there's still not that much story. Basically, there's 4 crystals. You 4 are the chosen heroes of light, and it's just like, go get the crystals, solve some problems along the way. Very like Ronin style, roaming, like good Samaritan type stuff. And it's a lot better, like it's more cohesive than Final Fantasy 1's, where Final Fantasy 1, you were just going around and it's just like, oh yeah, there's a vampire here now. And then you kill the vampire, and it's just like, okay, well now there's a dragon. Like, it's a little bit makes more sense than this. Like, you start out, and there's a town of all these people that got turned invisible by a djinn. And then you go get the mithril ring to seal the djinn, and then once you seal the djinn, you throw him into like a wellspring, and then that opens up the next thing. So it leads into the next, like, quest and villain like a little bit better. So like we've started to get like a actual story progression here. There's just not too much of it. Like, it's still basically just like, go here, help these people, stomp this monster, that's it. Now, one thing Final Fantasy III does different than most of the rest of the franchise is it's got the job system, similar to like Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler. Final Fantasy III did it first, and it did it pretty well, actually. It does it way better in the franchise with Final Fantasy V, 2 games later. But to start things off with Final Fantasy III, it does have some pretty good jobs in there. So you got like the obvious ones like the Knight, the Thief, the Mage, Black Mage, White Mage, stuff like that. And they're all pretty good for the most part. Like, once you level them up, you get different abilities and stuff like that. And, like, obviously only white mages can use white magic. Only black mages can use black magic. Thieves can steal. Knights are tanky, but can do a good bit of damage. Fighters are pretty much glass cannons, but they can do a whole hell of a lot of damage and stuff like that. And there's a lot more varieties of classes than I was expecting. And this turned into a positive here, but the more on that later. The negative for the job system, it's more of a nitpick than a mass negative, because again, trying to look at this on the NES, like I could see them not doing this for the limitations of that, but like on Pixel Remaster, which is what I played, I really think they should have went back and like did this to showcase like the differences in the classes. But they don't show like your stat buffs and decreases from changing class. So if you're a knight and you change to a black mage, obviously your, I forget what it's called. It's like vitality or magic, your magic attack stat obviously goes up. They don't show that. Like they don't show like your HP going down, your magic stat going up, and stuff like that when you change classes, which you just kind of have to know the classes and like see what is changing about them and stuff like that. Like it's more experimental play with it and see what changed than actually like seeing the stats change, like in like Bravely Default or Octopath Traveler. And I just thought, I'm not knocking it too bad for the NES one, but for the Pixel Remaster, I mean, come on, like we gotta see that. Like let's see it. And then also half the jobs are pretty shitty. They're not the greatest ever, and like there's not really any point in leveling them up because like you don't get any like passive boosts to anything like that. Like you just level up the Evoker class and then that gives you more Evoker magic, but it's not like you can parlay that Evoker magic into the Black Mage class or anything. So that's kind of crappy. Like Evoker is basically like a half-assed summoner, which more on that later, but it's kind of just like a weird stat boost summon that's ultimately not that great. Like it's kind of it's there, like it exists, and it can have some beneficial value, but most of the time, like you're gonna be going with like the 4 basic classes. Like you want your white mage, your dark mage, you want a tank, and an attacker. And Evoker doesn't fit into any of those. Like unless you're just doing like a white mage for heals and an Evoker for like stat buffs and stuff, like then I could kind of see it. But at that point, it's just like you're taking away some damage potential there, so like why even bother? Thief is also not the greatest. There's not really anything good to steal, and I think they can like open certain chests or something like that, like locked doors or something like that, but ultimately it's not really that good. And there's some other ones that aren't that great either. The ending is also pretty abrupt. Like, I knew I was at the final boss, but then they just, like, get out of there after you beat it. Like, you beat the final boss, and they're like, yep, happily ever after, roll credits. And that's it. Like, it ends very abruptly. And even, like, the lead up to the final boss is just like, alright, I'm storming the castle. And, oh, here's the final boss. Okay. Another nitpick of mine is I have what I refer to as the burden of knowledge. I know other versions of this game exist, like the one on the DS that, from what I can tell, is all around better because it not only gives like the 4 heroes of light like their own character and names and stuff like that, but it one thing, like, you start out as Onion Knights, which is just like a piddly little knight. Like, it's the worst class in the game, unless you level it up a lot. And it's just, like, not that great. But every character is color-coded. So, like, you have a green, a blue, a red, and a pink. And it was awesome. But then you change everybody to a black mage. They all put on, like, the Vivi outfit from Final Fantasy IX. Like, everybody's got the black robes and the mage hat. And it's not color-coded anymore. You make everybody a fighter, they all put on the red, like, karate gi, and that's it. Like, everybody's wearing red if they're the fighter. Like, I just wish they kept the uniqueness of, like, this is the pink one, so it's going to be a pink mage, or a pink fighter, and stuff like that. I think that would have helped a lot better to, like, at least, like, keep track of, like, who's who. I guess. I don't know. I just like color coding so much better than just everybody's the same if they're doing the same job. So moving on to the mediocres. Like I said, the characters are not color-coded. There's no individual characters in this game. In the DS one, they have some personality and stuff like that, and names. This one is still just like, hey, you name your character, and that's it. That's the character. Like, they talk a little bit, but they don't have, like, I don't even think that it says, like, their name you input, like, for who's saying what. So I don't know what characterization they have, if any. And also, I'm not that creative. I don't like naming people. Like, it's either gonna be my name, which is lame, or the character's name, which I prefer. Like, I don't want to name, you know, the main character of Final Fantasy VII. I'm not gonna name it Daniel. Like, I'm gonna keep his name as Cloud. I'm not gonna name him, like, Alex or anything like that. Like, it stays Cloud, Barret, Tifa. Like, it's a much better game. Like, they get paid to write the story and the characters, so, like, I want to appreciate that and, like, fully utilize the names there. So I don't really like naming my own characters. That's my thing, but, yeah, I know, product of its time and everything, but I don't really like it too much. And then the music in this one was a little so-so. Like, it was much better than probably the two previous games, honestly, if I'm being totally honest. It's just all pretty relatively, like, forgettable. It does have some great bangers, like the overworld theme, like The Wind Talks to Us Now, or something like that is the title. It is great. It's great throughout, and it's phenomenal. Like, this is one of the first ones in the Pixel Remaster that I started listening to the orchestrated new version and, like, the 8-bit versions as well, because the 8-bit versions definitely have their charm, and it's interesting to see how, like, the overworld theme is relatively complicated, and it's interesting to see how that turns into the 8-bit version, or I guess how the 8-bit version turned into the new version. But it's got some really good songs in there. Just most of them are, you know, just what it is. Like, it's just fantasy music and nothing too major that you're gonna, like, put on your iPod and, like, run to or anything like that. Alright, so now let's get into the positives. And here is going to get semi-spoilery, so if you truly don't want anything spoiled, now's your time to get away. But the job system is very good. It's set the bar for the job system. So for the most part, it's fairly good. Like I said, there are some stinkers in there, but there's a lot of, like, really good ones in there as well that kind of keeps you on your toes and, like, changing up your classes. So, you know, like, there's some, like, I think my Black Mage stayed that for the entire time. Like, I don't think I ever changed. And then by the time you feel like stale or something, you go to the next crystal, and then once you beat, like, the big crystal boss, you get more jobs. You get, like, 5 new jobs. So, like, you get your Black Mage, your White Mage, the Knight, and Fighter, and stuff like that. And then you get to the next one, and then you get that crystal, and those shards let you learn, like, the Scholar ability, which is, like, an instant, like, what stats or what, and what's the enemy weak to, and stuff like that. You get, like, Evoker, Thief, and stuff like that. It changes it up a good bit to where the classes are interesting enough that you want to, like, see what every class has to offer. And they also incentivize that with the bosses in the game. Like, I talked about it earlier, but, like, Scholar is a highly important quest, or what do you call it, job for the game, because there's a boss later on that, like, they tell you, it's just like, man, this guy can't be beat. Rumor has it a Scholar could defeat him, or something like that. And then, like, you go up against this boss, and basically he keeps, like, changing his weakness. So you got to use the Scholar ability to tell, like, what his weakness is, what it's changing to, and then just bust his ass with whatever he's weak to that turn. But probably my favorite job and this is first like franchise implications, is they finally introduced summons in Final Fantasy 3, and it is glorious. It's one of the best jobs in my opinion, because it not only is very cool to summon like, you know, monsters to fight on your behalf and stuff, but it comes with side quests, because there's 3 like big ass summons on like throughout the plot. Like you go to a mountain and then this big dragon will grab you, put you in his nest for his babies to eat you and stuff like that, and then fight you. And oh, it's Bahamut, king of the dragons. And this is at the beginning of the game, so it's an unwinnable fight, so you have to run away. And then end game, you can come back and beat his ass, and now you can summon Bahamut. So there's 3 like side quest summons like that. Like you get Bahamut, Odin, and Leviathan, I believe, and they're all very good. And it's just cool. Like no other jobs have like a side quest tied to them like that. Like I guess Evoker kind of does, because that's like a half-ass summon, but the summon side quests were very cool. Some great optional bosses there that came with like some good rewards, because now you can summon them to like bust someone else's ass. It was also a pretty funny and goofy game. It definitely started adding some humor into it, which was much needed after Final Fantasy 2. Like that was a dire one. Like that was bordering on Final Fantasy 16 as like the grimmest one. But there's definitely some good like funny humor in this, and it's pretty goofy, and it keeps it lighthearted enough to like be whimsical but serious enough to like get down to brass tacks and stuff like that. So I thought they balanced that very well. And it was a constant like challenge too. Like it was constantly hard, like, or not hard, but like challenging. Like I don't think I really lost too many boss fights, but I got close several times, and that might be due to like, you know, you beat the crystal boss and then you're like, alright, let me try out this job. And it's like, well, if I had stayed with the Black Mage at level 10, I would be mopping the floor with this guy. But I'm a level 3 thief right now, so I am struggling. And that was kind of like some of the fun of it, of like swapping jobs, and then that like almost artificially changes the difficulty for a more challenging experience. I will say though, and this seems to be a theme, the final dungeon I did have to grind for. Like that was hard. Like that final dungeon in Eureka was absolutely crazy, and it was very hard. Like basically, well, I'll save this for a spoiler section, but yeah, there's some optional bosses there, and yeah, you really gotta try for them. Like I had to end up grinding. Like I turned on like the 4 XP boost. I was like, let's get this over with. Jumped up 10 levels, fought him again, won, moved on to the next one, got my ass kicked, did the same thing, and kept going. But then probably my biggest positive for it, and this is something I love in all games, and I've been trying to like make a list of it. Like I wanted to do a top 10 of these. I don't really have that much information to pull from, because I don't know it, but whenever the world opens up is always a very cool thing to me. Like in Breath of the Wild, like it happens instantly. Like basically he walks up to that thing out of the shrine, and like it's like the whole world is open, and then it's the Great Plateau, and then you get off, and then it's like the whole world is even bigger now. Final Fantasy VII does the same thing, where you're in Midgar the whole time, and then you get out of Midgar, and it's like, holy hell, this is huge. But Final Fantasy III does it very, very cool. So Final Fantasy III, you're on this island the whole time, and then like you get the airship the first thing, and then it like you use it to bust down a mountain and it breaks, so you lose it. And then you get it later, and it gets upgraded to the point where it can now fly, like fly above the mountains and everything. And then it can only land in water. So then you fly, and then you get to the edge of the world, and you just keep going. And then it zooms out. The world is this big, but then like it zooms out, it turns out the world is this big, because this tiny little speck of a floating island is where you were, and now this basically this whole screen is the map, and like you were in this tiny little spot right here, and now it's huge, hugely open, and it was just so crazy to me that happened. I'm still kind of like flabbergasted that it was even possible on the NES. Like, it seems like crazy. Like, there's a lot to do in that big world too. It's not like it's just massive to be massive. Like, there's a whole hell of a lot. Like, there's a massive, like, metropolis style, like, medieval city. There's a like a lake that's like, you know, you got to get the water crystal and stuff like that. There's a bunch there, and you can even go even below that, because then you get the ability to turn your ship into a submarine, so now you can travel under the water and see everything under there. There's not much under there, but it's still cool. It is just crazy how big the world ended up being to me, because I thought it was already like that world in Final Fantasy 3 before, like the tiny one, it was basically the same size as like Final Fantasy 2 and 1's maps. But then it just gets even bigger, and it is absolutely crazy. It was one of my favorite parts of the game, and I love it in every game, but I don't have too many options to do it to make a list, unfortunately. So if you know of any great opening of worlds, let me know in the comments so we can make my dream list about it. But yeah, the map opening up like that was so cool to me. I really liked that a lot. It was one of my favorite parts of the game. And now we're going to get into spoilers here. So if you really, truly don't want anything spoiled, goodbye. But let's talk about Eureka, because Eureka was very hard and very cool. So you get through Eureka, you go through like all these doors and stuff like that. There's a bunch of hard bosses, and then you get to this intersection, and it's like there's 4 doors on the 4 corners, and then like one center door. So you go through the center door because it's glowing, and you're like, this is obviously the way to go. Then you encounter the Cloud of Darkness, the big bad guy of the game, and you just die instantly. Like, Cloud of Darkness is not playing around, because I'm gonna say she because it looks feminine, but the Cloud of Darkness, her attacks are just ridiculous. Like, she just does this big pulse cannon multiple times to wipe out your party. Like, there's no way you can heal or anything from that. Like, I think you technically can beat it, but again, I had to grind, so I got my ass kicked. But the cool part is the Cloud of Darkness has her 4 heroes of darkness, similar to the 4 heroes of light, but opposite. So you have to go through and kill the 4 heroes of darkness to weaken the Cloud of Darkness, to then have a chance to beat it and save the day. I thought that was a really cool system that, like, if you want to do it on hard mode, you can, but if you want an easier time, you can go beat all them and weaken the Cloud of Darkness that way. And that's what I ended up doing. And it ultimately was a pretty fun fight. These earlier final bosses are relatively hardly easy, I'll say, because they have like one big attack pattern that like fully wipes your party almost. But then if you can survive it, you heal up from that, and then they'll just repeat it and recycle it. So like once you learn the foil to their attacks and everything, then you got them down. Like, that's pretty much it. Like 1, 2, 3, they have all done it so far. Even 4 does it a little bit. More on that in the next video. But yeah, once you know the strategy to survive the Cloud of Darkness's like plasma beam or whatever, then it's not too hard. You just gotta fight to survive, fight to heal up, and beat it and overcome it. And then again, you get the abrupt ending. They're like, everybody's happy ever after now. These are all your friends that helped you out. Which that was actually kind of cool. So throughout the game, you help out these multiple people. You basically get a 5th party member that's like overworld only. So like you help out this queen, and she's like, going back to the Djinn. She's like, hey, I have this mithril ring. Let me accompany you to the mithril mine so we can trap this Djinn in it. It's like the first boss. And then so you beat it, and then she follows you around and everything, and then you beat it, and then you take her back home. She's like, thanks, that was really fun, I'll see you next time. And that was it. So you do that with 5 other people, and basically there's this plot room where like you encountered this guru and stuff, and he was like, hey, we're here to like heal the world or whatever, but you gotta kill me to do it. And then you're like, I don't want to kill you, and then you kill him, and then he comes back as a ghost, and he's like, hey, this room has a bunch of dragons in it, so we gotta get some pure hearts to kill the dragons or something like that. And basically it's all the side characters from the game. So like that princess comes back, Sid from the airship comes back, everybody that was like a little side character that joined you in the overworld as like the fake 5th party member comes back for that. So it was kind of cool to like tie everything back to like how far we've come and the past and where we came from and stuff like that. So that was a cool way to like tie that in to make you feel like, show you like what you've done and how far you have come from a piddly little onion knight to a ending like black mage magus crazy end class. But ultimately I really liked Final Fantasy 3. I didn't like it quite as much as Final Fantasy 1. I liked it better than Final Fantasy 2, but it still doesn't have a whole lot going on for it. But it was good. It helped me like stay in at least entertained in it. Like I wasn't too enthralled by the story or anything like that, but I was entertained the whole time. And for that, like it does have some negatives and some positives. So I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Final Fantasy 3 took me roughly about 16 hours. I enjoyed it for most of that time, but I feel like with a few slight tweaks I could have enjoyed it just a little bit more. So 6 out of 10 I would say is pretty fair. It's not the greatest, but it's not the worst. That's my feelings on Final Fantasy 3. So let me know yours in the comments. Stay tuned for more Final Fantasy stuff from me, because like I said, I have like 4, 5, Dirge of Cerberus, Crisis Core. I played all those so far, so I gotta film at least 4 more videos here. And I'm working on Final Fantasy 6 right now. So stay tuned for that, and I'll catch y'all next time.